of you who don't know me, my name is Alicia Odie. I serve on the board with the Sioux Falls Area Running Club, which Charlotte is a member of, and reached out to her, and she so graciously accepted the invitation to speak to us today on the topic of endurance nutrition. So we have a pretty fun day planned today. We're going to start off with Charlotte's presentation and then move outdoors with John and do a trail run. Everyone's invited to join us. But this topic of endurance nutrition, there's no one better to lead us on it than Charlotte. Kooima is the last name. Charlotte is an accomplished Ironman athlete. She is a registered dietitian nutritionist, and she is licensed in 3 states, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa. Correct? She brings a plethora of knowledge to this area, so we're just really excited to have her here today. Accomplishments for Charlotte include 39 half marathons. That's incredible. 10 marathons, 3 ultra marathons, 9 half Ironmans, 3 full Ironman triathlons, and then she is training for one here at the end of the month, so she's going to compete again here in April. As I already said, she is a Sioux Falls Area Run Club member. She is an advocate for endurance sportsmanship, a cheerleader for all, and a role model for many. Please help me welcome Charlotte.
Well, first of all, I want to just keep this open to what you want to hear and what applies to you, because I can get talking and I get on soapbox about nutrition and what's out there, so you may need to funnel me back into areas that you want to hear. So let me ask you this. When you think about endurance nutrition, whether it's yourself or just in general, what's the first thing you think about as far as like, what should I eat?
Carbs.
Carbs. What kind of carbs?
Simple carbs.
Simple meaning what?
I honestly don't know. I need to learn all this.
Okay, so we need to know what is a simple carbohydrate. All right, what else?
I think of the nutrition kind of differently, like pre-race nutrition, like what are you eating the weeks and months before the event, and as well then what are you eating the day of the event. I think could look completely different.
Okay, anybody else? Yes.
So I think of input versus output, so more of what's happening with my body while I'm in the middle of my activity and how can I best fuel it.
Okay. What are some myths that you want to know about, that you've heard about and you're like, I hope she talks about this, or I've always wanted to know this?
I want to talk about the sodium issue. As a high sweater, like what does my sodium intake look like?
Okay. Anybody else?
The right time to drink water.
Timing. Okay.
The best source for recovery.
All right. Nobody wants to know about protein? I was about to say that. The one thing I hear all the time is like, well, how much protein should I have? And do I have protein? You know, should I load up on protein? Should I avoid protein? What about protein? So I'm curious then if that was on your mind about that. So.
Well, there's all those different styles of eating. You know, some people are a mix of vegetables, carbs, protein. Some people, you know, the keto, the high protein diets.
Yes. Have you ever heard about the seafood diet?
Yeah, I'm on that.
Yeah, you see it, you eat it. So, first of all, let's get one thing clear. I'm not a twig and berry dietitian. I had a patient say that to me many years ago. He was a truck driver and he thought I was going to pull everything the way that he liked. And so I said, no, we're not going to do that. You know, that's not quality of life for you. We're going to make what you do work, but we're going to have to decrease what you're doing and spread things out a little bit better. So first of all, as I say, all foods fit. There is no such thing as a bad food. It's how much we eat of it and how often we eat of it. So having said that, let's start with carbohydrates a little bit. So these are the basics that I want to just touch base on, which again, like I said, I can spend hours talking about each particular topic. I'm an adjunct professor over at Dordt University, and I teach nutrition, and this is a whole semester smashed into like 1 hour. So please, again, if you have questions, raise your hand and just, or blurt it out, because I want to make sure that we hit everything that you are, what's on your mind as far as nutrition goes. So carbohydrate, the first thing that we need to know about carbohydrate, which you already know, is it is our fuel source, right? So if you have a car and you don't put gas in it, you don't go anywhere. You have to have carbohydrate in your life in order to operate. It's just how it is. Our bodies require minimally about 130 grams of carbohydrate a day. So that's just simply for brain health. So that's to make sure that we do not flip over into a ketotic state. When you flip over into a ketotic state, your body will run on ketones. And that's a starvation mode, and your brain does not do well with that. And so most studies and literature suggest a minimum of 130 grams per day. Now, I have had patients that exceed 500 grams per meal. So we have overdone carbohydrate in our society by far. But to say that we need low carbohydrate is not the answer for endurance athletes, because that's our fuel source. So we have to have that in order to run. So having said that, muscle and liver is our biggest storage of glycogen. And glycogen is just another fancy word for carbohydrate that's stored within the body. So about 60% of our glycogen, or our glucose, is stored within our muscles. So as we exercise, we're going to start to deplete that if we don't replace that. And our liver is really fascinating, because our liver, as I usually call the liver, the mother hen of the body. So the liver really senses blood sugar control, and if we get to a point where we've started to deplete our nutrition or our glycogen stores, the liver has sensors and says, well, nothing's coming in, I better take care of this. And it will produce its own glucose and shove it into the bloodstream to make sure that we don't enter in a depletion mode. And the liver is notorious for overprotecting the body, and so it always produces way more than what it needs. So people who follow a very, very low carbohydrate diet or a keto diet or things like that, they often will say, well, yeah, I'm losing weight, but my blood sugars are high. And so then they come to me and I get referred to visit with them about their blood sugar. And I'm like, well, yes, your blood sugar is high, but I'm not eating any carbohydrate. Why is my blood sugar so high? The liver knows that you're in a ketotic state, so it's going to produce sugar to keep your body functioning and protect the brain. And guess what? Now the pancreas gets involved, because the pancreas does not like to have sugar in the blood. So it produces insulin to take care of all the sugar. And so you have this whole cycle going on behind the scenes. In the meantime, you're taxing your pancreas. And now your pancreas, let's say you're 30, your pancreas may now have aged to 40 or 50. So you slowly damage that pancreas and its receptors and its cells, because it's overworking, it's overproducing insulin. So if you have any risk factors for type 2 diabetes in your family line, you're going to have it sooner. You want to protect that insulin, you want to protect that pancreas, and so you want to stop that whole background show going on. So that's one of the biggest downfalls with a keto type diet or a very, very low carbohydrate diet. All right, so now we know that the liver is responsible for some of this depletion area. It is fascinating, though. It really is, that the liver can produce its own energy and help protect us. So, but we want to be careful, again, with how we treat that liver too. So when we talk about carbohydrate and endurance, right away to me is how you carb load. I get that so often, especially at the university, because I have sports kids, the volleyball team, the football kids, they're often loading up carbohydrate the night before. You know, let's have this big pasta fest. Literally 12 hours before we go out on a run. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not how you carb load. How do you guys carb load? Tell me.
I don't.
No, okay?
I just eat normally.
Okay, good, all right.
You're probably ingesting enough carbohydrate that your muscle glycogen stores are full.
How do you know that?
Well, I mean, I guess before an event, you would typically not be taxing your body to the point where you would hopefully be depleting those muscle stores. And if you eat normally, you should be able to, I think, replenish the stores. I mean, I guess I don't know 100%, but I guess that's just kind of the theory I've gone with.
Okay, anybody else? How do you carb load? Or do you carb load? We got no's.
Okay, so I do pasta before, but I just simplify my food and I start cutting fats out, typically, just because fats are harder to digest, right?
Yes.
So just very simple pasta usually before with no cheese or anything like that. But yeah, I'm totally the pasta people.
Okay.
I mean, it shouldn't be the night before, though. It should be probably a couple of 2 to 3 days before, and then the night before, you don't want to introduce anything
Right.
kind of out of the ordinary into your GI system that you have and are completely overwhelming it.
Right.
You're going to pay for it the day of your
Yep.
whatever you're doing.
Questions?
So there's kind of that old adage, don't change anything on race day or before race day. So generally I eat the same diet, but I'll scale back on my protein just so that that's not sitting in my GI overnight. And I usually add in a little bit more carb, like more rice or maybe oatmeal or something like that that's a little bit more easily digestible. So I do carb load a little bit, but more in the sense that I'm cutting out just a little
Right.
bit.
So caloric value-wise, you're probably still within your normal range, but you've just shifted your percentages.
I would say.
Okay, well, carb loading is interesting and it's an ongoing research. It used to be that, obviously, and it still carries to today, that these pasta fests, within the night before, are still going on. But that is technically not really the best way to do it, because when you load up on carbohydrate, it also pulls up water. So you may feel sluggish and you may feel bloated. You may even be a little swollen in your hands and feet the next morning, because the body is saturated already because you've tapered. And like Lance said, you've tapered down, and if you eat normal, now your energy expenditure isn't as great, so your body is going to be storing all this time, and then you just saturate it with 500 grams of carbohydrate. What's your body to do? So it starts to pull some water as it digests things out. So the night before is really, really not the best thing to do unless it's a normal portion. So doing a pasta meal the night before, great, that's fine, but don't load. Don't have this huge pasta thinking, I'm going to spend this all tomorrow. It's going to cause some GI issues. So keep your portions normal. Really, what research suggests is 3 days up to 24 hours prior to an event. So, and with that, as I'll teeter on with Lance here, is that you hit peak training, and so this is your depletion state. You want to train your body to be depleted. You want to get to that point where that liver does need to have extra storage from eating. And once you get to that depletion state and you start your taper, now you can start storing again. The muscles can start storing, the liver can start storing, but it's not at a one-shot deal. It's over time. So up to 3 days prior to your event is when you really want to start focusing on increasing carbohydrate, not at one meal, not at one shot, but change those percentages of what you normally do. Reduce fat, not necessarily protein, but you don't want to increase protein because that's a whole other issue. But you want to kind of slowly shift that where your carbohydrate intake is a little bit higher than normal. But again, slow, not one shot. So that's kind of the big thing that I usually like to focus on with athletes, is to Pay attention not to really overload carbohydrate the night before, just because it can create some of that edema and sluggish, and you might be winded that next morning when you first get out and go, because your body has this extra fluid on board. We talked about wanting to know about pre-race day, endurance event, and post-meal. We'll get to that in a little bit. Generally speaking though, as endurance athlete in taper time, you shift your carbohydrate intake almost up to 75 to 80% of your total calories should be carbohydrate based. And that's, again, to help replace that glycogen store that you depleted during peak training. Another thing that I'll spend a little bit of time here on carbohydrate is we overdo carbohydrate all the time. Tell me this, what was the first race you ever did that you thought in your mind, I am a superstar? I cannot believe I ran that distance. Serious. Mine was a 10K. I was floored. I thought there was no way on earth I would ever make that. And to me, in my mind, that was a marathon. You know, because you run a race, right? And no one understands what a marathon distance really is. And they're like, oh, you did that race? Oh yeah, my daughter did that 5K too. No, this was a marathon. So what race did you do that you thought, wow, that you were something special? What distance?
Probably a 5K.
Yeah, way back when?
My first half marathon.
Half marathon? What do you use for fuel that day? Do you remember?
I used dried dates and things. That's what I had in my pocket.
Okay.
I was handed a goo at mile 9, and I did hit 2 hydration stops with Gatorade, but I took the water, so probably would do it a little bit different now, maybe. But.
This may date me a little bit, but man, when I ran that 10K, I had my belt on, I had a bottle on this side, a bottle on this side, I had goo slapped all over, I had Gatorade stashed here and stashed there. I mean, all but a pound of sugar on my back, you know, because I'm like, I'm gonna need it. I've gotta have carbohydrate to run. And I'm the slowest thing on the earth. I tell you what, I can go all day, but I'll just keep chugging. Yesenia, we know what that's about, right? Yes. Anyway, so, you know, now as I do events, and I know better over the course of many, many, many years, you know, you told a line for a half marathon and you're like, you see these people with these belts full of carbohydrate. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I wasn't even planning on drinking water. I mean, it's just 13 miles, right? It's just 13 miles. Now that sounds like a crazy talk, right? But what we have done is we have pacified ourselves with carbohydrate. We think we need carbohydrate in order to run. We need carbohydrate in order to be an endurance athlete. So what I challenge you to do is to train to deplete yourself, to change the mindset, to change the dependence on carbohydrate. There's no way you need a belt full of goo for a half marathon. Your body technically, if you did nothing, you could go 8 hours on what your stored glycogen in your body. You probably die after 8 hours. But that's what research shows, you know, if you project out the rate of expenditure on a person, 8 hours. So there's no reason to depend on carbohydrate that much. So I challenge you always, constantly challenge yourself, change your mindset. Sometimes you gotta find that switch, because it can be a mind battle, but challenge yourself to train to depletion. And then you can reabsorb better, you can train better, and control that carbohydrate. See, I'm getting off on a tangent. Okay, any questions more about carbohydrate? Simple, let me answer simple versus complex carbohydrate. So simple carbohydrate is sugar. It's simple, it's easily digested, easily absorbed. So anything, as people would say, the white category, so white potato, white bread, white rice, plain old table sugar, fruit. Complex carbohydrate would be where you add in fiber. So it takes longer to digest. So anything that's more fibrous would be considered more complex. Brown rice, brown bread, sweet potatoes, those, just more fibrous type foods. Okay, answer? Okay, all right. Protein. Protein in itself, we as endurance athletes, you don't need a huge protein in your diet. We do need a little extra, especially during peak training, but that doesn't mean your whole lifestyle now is high protein. And we're only talking about maybe 10 to 20 grams extra per day. So an egg is 7 grams. So we don't need this huge protein load. And really, what I hear a lot is, well, I'm trying to build some muscle. I need more protein. Guess what? Protein doesn't turn into muscle magically, okay? Your body only is going to need X amount. And then what does it do with the rest?
Flushes it out.
You got to get rid of it somehow, right? So magically it just doesn't Popeye, or who said Hulk formation? Remember that one time, were you the Hulk formation? I forget the comment. But anyway, my Hulk formation.
Yeah, it was in that picture that you had.
Oh, yes, my Hulk. I can just visualize like muscles popping out. That doesn't happen when you eat a high protein diet. So one of my things about protein that I always want to make sure that people understand, protein takes a lot of water to digest. So if you have a high protein diet, your fluid needs are greater than someone who doesn't have a high protein diet. So please be careful with that protein and thinking that that is going to be advantageous for you. The other thing is, it stresses out your kidneys. All that protein has to be digested, and then the byproduct of protein, of course, is all of the urea and everything that has to go through the kidney. And so you have to have more water, and if you don't have that water, it pulls it from your body and flush it out. So just be very, very cautious of that. Protein is more important for endurance athletes after an event or after long duration exercise. And again, it doesn't mean you have a 50-gram protein shake. It means 10 extra grams perhaps. And timing of it is important. Usually an endurance athlete, about an hour to 2 after exercise lasting greater than 3 to 4 hours is when you need to have that little extra protein. Just because you go run a fast 10K doesn't mean you need to eat an extra burger for the night. Okay, it's endurance, so 3-4 hours and beyond is when that extra little protein can help build you back up. All right, really when we look at performance, most literature and research says that a higher protein diet does not improve performance. There's no study that links intake of protein or protein supplements to improve performance. Does it help bulk somebody up? Yep, because it's going to turn it to fat. If your body doesn't need the calories, it's going to turn it into storage form. And storage form of calories is adipose tissue. So, careful on that. Any questions on protein? By the way, yes?
Yeah, so like a lot of the Quest bar stuff, all that, it has higher protein and higher calorie. So like when you're doing like a long, like an 8-hour type thing, should you be eating protein higher, just snack food, or should it just be all the goo packages?
Yeah.
Simple?
Well, yeah. We'll get into that. So during an event like that, that is when endurance is a little different than shorter distances. And so endurance, you do need a little protein as you compete or as you go through the day. Primarily, it helps slow digestion because it does take longer to digest. So it helps the carbs stay in the gut just a little bit longer, and also it can help with satiety, so making you not feel hungry, and then all of a sudden your mind thinks, oh my God, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, give me food. So a little protein can help that mindset and also subdue some of that hunger issues, which, can lead you down a bad road if you're getting depleted too. So, yes, so a little bit of protein in endurance events is helpful. And actually, you know what, at the end of the day, a slice of pepperoni pizza is wonderful. It's salty, it's got carbohydrates, it's got, you know, a little protein on it. Well, whatever pizza you want, but, so, yeah, you know, whatever works for you is best. You don't have to do the traditional booze and all that stuff. I mean, gosh, when I'm on my bike and I go for a long ride, like cinnamon roll is my go-to for the start. You know, and it's got simple sugar. I mean, I'm always thinking, you know, it's like, oh, it's good carbohydrates, it's got simple sugar in it, it's got a little fat in it, so it'll slow my digestion. Oh, but I better drink because I have enough of a bit of carbohydrate, you know, so it's just constant going through the head, but yes.
So with carbohydrates, we have simple and complex. With protein, is a protein, or are there some sources that are better for immediate use versus later? I know it takes longer to digest a protein, but hopefully that question makes sense to you.
To the body, the protein is protein. It's going to break it down into amino acids and then utilize what it needs. Now, the question, maybe I'll switch your question around. What protein is best for an endurance athlete? Leucine. Leucine is a wonderful source of protein, and that would be found in eggs. Eggs is your top source of leucine. And so that would be a really, really good protein source to have as an endurance athlete into your arsenal. Yeah. Arginine and glutamine are really good too, and you get that in a lot of different things. So, but usually like an after endurance event or even during an endurance event, some type of egg is really good. Tuna is a really good source of leucine too. So, yeah. Okay, that's protein. Fat, we're really not even going to talk much about fat because fat really doesn't do anything for performance. There are some studies out there that are trying to determine if a person who is on a keto diet performs better than a non-keto person, and most of the research out there, it's just not proving it. So some people are pretty much bent on that lifestyle. Go for it. If it works for you, great. But research says a high-fat diet does not improve performance. What we know about fat is that it takes a really long time to digest. And if it sits in your gut too long, guess what your body does? Get rid of it. And how does the body get rid of things it doesn't like? Or it's how it is. It's just how it is. And whether you like it or not, it'll happen, no matter where you are, because that's the body. The body does not want it, and it's going to get rid of it. So keep in mind, and especially if you're a little more fat sensitive, when your gut is in this peak training, it's going to be more sensitive to things. And so fat is just not really a good thing to put on a sensitive gut. So it's a great source of energy. It's 9 calories per gram, which is almost, double than carbohydrate and protein. But just as you enter in some of these endurance type events, just be careful. And you know your body best, so you do what's best for your gut. A little bit on our vitamins. I often get the question on, what should I be supplementing and what should I take? And I don't know if we get the mindset is that we've depleted ourselves so much that we need to supplement. But what we do know is with endurance and depletion, generally speaking, endurance athletes do show some deficiencies in B vitamins. And primarily B vitamins are vitamins that work with the ATP process or the energy systems within the body. So we do find that if an athlete is feeling, some sluggishness or maybe even has some anemia in the B vitamin group, a general B vitamin supplement. Usually I try not to specify vitamins. I just say take a multivitamin, because when you get into endurance events, you can't always take in enough to replace. Vitamin C is good too.